Welcome back to the food truck where we say God is doing something special for us on the Me and You. Over the past 2 years, I have to say that I have grown to love crime stories. Crime stories like 48 Hours, Crime Stoppers, Court TV, and my all-time favorite, get ready for this, where I have seen every episode, Reasonable Doubt. I love this show where a former crime detective and a prosecuting lawyer will team up and investigate a former case. They will meet with the family members and friends of the convicted felon who they believe has been wrongly accused of a crime. Now, being wrongly accused of that crime usually means that they have been placed in a mistaken identity. A mistaken identity is best described when a person who witnessed the crime and based off of what they saw, they place the blame on the wrong person. Sometimes it's intentional. Their brain, their mind, and their eyes are not fully capable to process of what just occurred. They believe fully that the person that they have accused is the person who committed the crime. And based off the accusation of this witness, it places this convicted felon behind bars. Mistaken identity is a common thing. And this can be seen, this can be seen if I'm thinking of an example of the Man of Steel, Superman. I just don't get this. You have Jimmy, who is a professional photographer for the Daily Planet. You would think that Jimmy, being a person who is a professional, who takes professional pictures, would recognize that Clark Kent is the same person as Superman. Clark Kent, who disguises himself, who places glasses on, is actually Superman. Jimmy is not able to see that the photo that he takes of Superman is the same person who works 20 feet from him at the Daily Planet. Now, I want to make this clear. If I ever get blamed for a situation where mistaken identity has taken place, where a witness has come forth and seen one thing and not able to process things and puts me in blame, make sure that Jimmy or a person who is like Jimmy is not the person who witnessed for me, to be clear. Oh no, don't allow that to happen, because if you know of someone like Jimmy, you're going to be locked up. Mistaken identity places the blame on the wrong person instead of giving credit to the right person. Mistaken identity, I believe, is something that we all fall into when dealing with God. I believe that we know who God is, what God can do, what God will do. But we give ourselves, other people, and other sources the credit over the true identity of God. We believe God is the way, but based off of our small moments that we encounter with God, we take those small sample size and taking this, small sample size, it never helps us to understand the true identity of God. To receive some understanding of God, a person needs to read the word, study the word, meditate on the word, and pray over the word. Okay. I might be getting some pushback. So let me explain it like this by asking this question. Who created evil? If you was to say the devil created evil, right there is an example of mistaken identity. For God created evil, and God created good. Now, one could ask the question based off this information. A good question would be, why would God create evil? And I would say, to answer that question, by reading the word, studying the word, meditating on the word, and praying over the word, that God created evil because, one, just because God created, man makes evil. Meaning this, just because God created evil, it is our choice to yield to evil, tempted to do evil. Just because God created doesn't mean man has to make it. It's a difference between creation and making. God created evil, but man, living by the flesh, makes evil into existence. Which leads to number 2. By evil being present, makes humanity have the opportunity to call on the Lord for strength, to persevere through, and asking also for forgiveness for the choices that we made. I know that's hard to swallow, but without evil, one would have to recognize if we didn't have evil, we wouldn't need God and we wouldn't want God. So in this series of Knowing God, I believe the best way of starting this whole conversation through preaching and teaching is to understand God from the beginning. And the best place that I can think of to understand the beginning, we have to start at the beginning at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Now, this passage is one of the first passages that I had the opportunity to memorize while in Sunday school class on a Sunday morning with Miss Thompson as my Sunday school teacher. And you know this passage, and if you don't even have to look it at. And it goes a little bit something like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right off the bat, we see and need to know that God is the creator. And hearing this passage makes the following passage that I want to recite confirm that God is the one, the true God that has created everything. Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 6 says, "You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them." Isaiah 45, verse 7, "I form light and created darkness. I make well and created woe. I, the Lord, do all these things." Psalms 8, 3 through 8 says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established? What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them, yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands and have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the path of the sea. Oh, the passages that have just been raised are because of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. The beginning story makes a declaration to the reader, to the audience, that God was and is the beginning that started it all. This declaration shares with us that no matter how we want to interpret the order when God created a certain thing, it doesn't matter. The one thing that is for certain, and that is that God created everything. No matter how we read Genesis, the creation story, and what or particular order it comes in, all we can establish and understand after reading the creation story is that God is the creator. And when looking at this creation story, there are a few things that we need to know that will assist us. And I want to raise it. Number one, I'm thinking about the creation story. The creation story, when shared, was not a story that was written down. It wasn't placed on scribes. It was shared amongst the people from generation to generation orally. That means they shared it by mouth. There was nothing to write on, no translation, but it was shared generations after generations by the mouth. Sort of like the telephone game that we play. And from generations to generations, it showed the origin of the beginning. Now, some theologians believe that the story was first written down and scribed out during the time of Moses' existence. So I can remember the time when I first attended biology in college. And the first thing I can remember was the first day when we entered into the classroom. My professor had a question for us all. The question was, how do you believe it all began? I thought about that. And I thought, is this a trick question? When this was asked, I was like, is this a trick question? So I wrote my answer down. I thought about it, wrote it down, and little did I know that there was so many ideas on how it all began in each person's mind. Mistaken identity. The professor of the class gave the class an opportunity to share our answers, response to the masses. And at that time, I didn't want to just answer. I just wanted to sit back, listen to the other responses. I heard from the cosmos ideology to the evolution that they so call a theory. And hearing all of these responses, I began to get sick in my stomach. So I raised my hand, and when I was called on, I said this. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. You would have thought I just said that the world was about to come to an end, based off of the faces and the response that came after what I just said. One person said, how can that be that God created everything? That doesn't make sense to me. I listen and I smile. I listen and I smile. I listened and I smiled for 5 minutes, listening to all that smoke that was directed at me that came my way. Finally, my professor looked at me and said, Gordon, would you like to respond to everything that you have heard? I said, I sure do. And I said this, you all have shared your understanding on how you believe that the world was created. I listened to all your explanation. I see it as if it did happen the way that you stated, based off of the science. Let me ask you, then who or what made it possible to come together like it did? You see, you don't have to place of origin. You don't have a place of origin to start from, just from thinking it up in your little mind of yours. But I told them, I have an answer that answers all my question when I'm trying to understand how it all began. That one verse that I share with you, that says that God created the heavens and the earth, it puts an emphasis that God can be looked as a noun that exists, a verb that did it, and it is a main idea that you can never understand the fullness of. Let me say that again, that God can be looked as a noun that exists, a verb that did it, and is the main idea that you can never ever fully understand the fullness of. That God is the creator. I share with you that I love reasonable doubt. And there is a moment that the former crime detective and the prosecuting lawyer will go to different individuals and ask questions to. But there's one question that every time they ask each witness, each family member, each professional in the field, they ask this one question. Based off the evidence, is it possible that this convicted felon is innocent? The individual that is asked that question will usually respond by saying that there is a possibility, but it's not 100% guaranteed. And with all the science that give reasonable doubt and mistaken identity to other sources, about this creation of this world. The people who have given mistaken identity to other sources. And based off of these theories, they try to give a reasonable doubt. They haven't read and believed in a source that has all the evidence that is not a possibility, but a guarantee. You see, I have read the evidence, and after reading the information, I am 100% sure when talking about the creation of this world. And that is just like that declaration that is stated in Genesis chapter 1. God created the heavens and the earth. So with all this reasonable doubt and the mistaken identity of sources that give credit to other individuals or themselves or other sources, giving credit to other things that is not of God is the one who creates. God is the creator. And by him being able to create everything shows the power and the magnificence of our Lord. See you next time on the food truck, where we say God is doing some amazing thing for us on the Me and You. See you next time.